Hello, hello. So we are back at Universal Spirit. It's me, Christina, with Karma's Eye Psychic LLC, and we are starting 2022 by talking about the paranormal. If you caught our last episode, we were just talking about the different types of hauntings, what hauntings are, and what they mean and how they really resonate with us, and some scientific findings. This episode, we're going to talk about religion and the acknowledgement of the paranormal. Religions or religious belief systems that embrace it, religious beliefs that kind of, not say ignore it, but don't really want to give it much life, don't want to give it much relevance, don't want to give it much of anything, if even believing in it at all. As curious to say is that there are some ideas that kind of throw the paranormal belief under the rug while still nurturing, religious beliefs which are very much similar to what a paranormal experience would be. So in this episode, when I refer to the word religion or religious, I will be talking about, like the world's top, most populated religions, which would in fact be, the different sectors of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Not to debunk other religions and main religions such as Hinduism, and Taoism and Buddhism and all the thousands of other religions that do exist. We will slightly dive into like Norse, pagan, and Wiccan religions and traditions when it comes to the paranormal, because it's not so obvious that even though those religions are centered on spirituality, not all of the Wiccan and pagan Norse beliefs actually cater to the existence or the scientific findings of the paranormal. So just keep in mind, when I say religious, I'm talking about those top three, those top four, really. So starting with that, my episode today is basically paraphrasing from a study which was done on a teenage group, teenagers going from 13 to 17, about them being asked off the bat, regardless of their religious beliefs, how much do you believe in the paranormal? It's important to know that even though it's such a young age group, however, these are the ages when we start believing in things, that we were not really taught. So this is a very influential age, and this age group does have a lot to share in their experience of what they believe about the spiritual. So the study was asking, teenagers about what is the paranormal to you? Do you believe in it? Why or why not? Okay. And most teenagers in the group of Christianity, most of them, I would say about 60 to 80% of them, said that they did not, in fact, acknowledge the paranormal, or they did not acknowledge any of the scientific findings of the paranormal. This study also concluded that the reason being is because most of, those teenagers were associated with a group of people who attended church or religious, ceremonies regularly. So they had a really good, a really strong hold to their religious and their faith, obviously what they were taught. The interesting part about that study was that the religious aspect of Christianity and attending church regularly is that there is mention of, speaking in tongues, being possessed by the Holy Spirit, hearing voices, hearing the voice of God, feeling the Spirit of God. However, those people did not, in fact, acknowledge the paranormal as the same thing, that they did, in fact, believe that the paranormal entirely was evil, or the presence of evil, and not fully, going into the spiritual aspect, that some paranormal or some hauntings are just, lost souls, or possibly, innocent victims, or, if not, just a wandering spirit that just wants to be there, that poses no harm whatsoever. So it was actually interesting to hear, that from that group. The other group was a smaller group that did acknowledge the existence of the paranormal, the belief in astrology, the belief of, demons, angels, and their whole existence around us, planetary movements, and the existence of science and energy. That they actually believed the complete opposite, that they believed in the paranormal 100%, that they had said that they had experienced it themselves, that they do understand the belief of aliens and different dimensions. A lot of these young people were, they had a lot more faith in science rather than in religion, where they could understand the separation between science and a social order. Most of these teenagers also believed in, astrologers, psychics, soothsayers, mystics, witches, warlocks, and not on a negative scale. That just to acknowledge their existence was giving them just as much of a voice as, religion is given a voice. Okay, so like I said, it's not limited to, we're just talking about the top 4 most popular religions. So that smaller group was less likely, they attended, religious ceremonies and religious activities and events a lot less, that they were more open-minded to other things in life, other belief systems, and also open to other people's religions and open to a lot of other cultures as well. That group actually had taken on other cultures' belief systems other than their own, the less and less they attended theirs. So I found that to be extremely interesting. Now I'm going to take a little bit of a turn toward Judaism in particular. Now there are a lot of paranormal and, ritualistic, spiritual mentions in a lot of Judeo text, the casting out of the demons and the pigs, the just basically the divineness of Lazarus rising from the dead again, and the mention of Lilith in the Garden of Eden. So there's a lot of Judeo texts that are not acknowledged, at least by the Christian faith, in particular when it comes to these extra, essential things. Even in the belief of Adam having another wife, is not very well accepted in the Christian, religion. However, a lot of Judeo texts support it. Another thing that Judeo texts support is the existence of the paranormal. It is mostly translated as negative when they refer to demons and lost spirits. However, they at least acknowledge it. They do make it part of their religious gatherings and learning teachings. I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say. And in that belief system, they also rarely reject the idea that these things are controlled by a center source, such as God. So they do understand, or they do teach, that the paranormal and the existence of it is, in fact, an extension of their God or of their faith. It is something that is part of our world. So it is something that should be, known and known how to deal with and navigate through. Similarly, when it comes to, Muslim and Islam, they are in general, in the study that I was going over, that is very similar. It is interesting to know, though, going back to Judeo text, the existence and the necessity for having exorcisms obviously is an acknowledgement of the paranormal. That's where Christianity had adopted, their need for priests and to cast out demons. A lot of Judeo texts did provide the fact that the paranormal does exist in possession, and there is a way to rid these spirits or place them somewhere else, or send them back to where they came from. In a lot of Norse pagan and Wiccan beliefs, that there's a constant belief of wandering spirits. There is a constant belief of haunting. Not all Norse and Wiccan and pagans take on the scientifical aspect of it, but more of a spiritual, that you create the negativity that's in your life. You create a lot of the energy that is around you, therefore hauntings, or therefore things moving in a positive direction, or the positive ebb and flow. That belief of the psychic energy created and technically never being destroyed. So if you were to send negative energy somewhere, it'll be alive and well somewhere else. Ergo, the existence of the paranormal. Now, a question that I am going to ask, which I'm pretty sure is on some of your minds, is that why would people not acknowledge the existence of the paranormal? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you when, obviously there are shows about hauntings. People claim that they have been haunted, seen things, heard voices or whatever, had things touch them out of nowhere, had psychic dreams of people being there and, looking up the history and knowing that, there was someone living there at some point, and that's why I'm hearing the piano play or whatever. Why would then you not acknowledge the existence of the paranormal? Well, first, that science and religion have always been at war with each other, right? There's always been a war between science and religion. Religion is the existence of God, and God orchestrating all these things, and the existence of angels and demons and those opposing forces, where scientists believe that, well, there is kinetic energies and this, and there's energies from rocks, and it causes vibration, and it's this and it's that, where it really does oppose the belief of it being controlled, where science kind of does not believe that these forces are not controlled. They are created out of our control. That's why there are so many different variants and so many different species, that mix with each other, and they create these new things where even wine, there's no same wine anywhere, where you can mix, seeds and create something new all the time, just as an example. So they just believe science is something that you cannot contain, you cannot control. And with that, and with all these energies, and with all these people, and all these, intentions, and, all these expansions of time and just force, there really is no containment for it. So science believes in the existence of the paranormal because it's like humans have been on this planet for so many centuries, animals have been here, things have been growing, dying forever. So the existence of the paranormal would have to be another one of those expansive ideas where there will always be a spot in, a neighborhood that will always have this energy running through it. It'll always have this, this passing through it, these portals and these ideas of, the energy now is a living thing, right? It is now alive and well, just like everything else that has manifested itself in a physical form. And then obviously on the religious side, where they believe that God and, gods or angels, whoever control everything, the paranormal kind of pulls that out of control, where it's kind of like if you're hearing voices, it's got to be the voice of God. It has to be, or it's the voice of the devil. It can't be either or. It can't be anything else other than that. It has to stay within those two bounds, right? Either you're hearing good things or bad things. Some religious people believe that if you're hearing voices, that you are, you're hearing demons, because, angels don't speak to you that way. They wouldn't be distracting you and stuff like that. And then on the flip side, you've got people saying, well, if you're hearing voices, then it has to be the voice of God. It can't be anything else. It's very closed off. It's very, contained. It's very closed off. It kind of just runs in a circle. It runs in a maze, and it ends up in the same box, no matter how you squeeze it. There's always an explanation to why it runs right back to God, or your belief, or it's this or it's that. Even in pagan, Norse, and Wiccan beliefs, that they say, well, if you're hearing that, sometimes that could be your deities, that could be your spirit guides, it could be your ancestors. Like I said before, with that particular belief system, it's a little bit more open. However, there is a closed-minded sector of Norse pagan and beliefs. Another question that you might be thinking of is, why would I even bring this up? Why would I even make an episode or a podcast about this in particular? Well, this is in fact a spiritual podcast, and these are some of the things that do come up with people who are thinking about leaving religion. Not to enforce that, but for those of you who know me very well, I'm not very religious. I left the church more than 10 years ago, so it's more like for those who are looking to do that, just to give a little incentive, give a little courage. If you're looking for that little boost, this is one subject that will come up, when you are thinking about doing that. Am I now going to be exposed to these things that I just did not really believe in before, or I was not really taught about, I'm not really well equipped for, or are you on the other side where it's kind of like, I've always believed this, I've always known this is true, this is real, and another reason why I would bring this up is because, there's always that battle between spirituality and science. There are very few spiritual people who will incorporate science with their belief system. And I do encourage that. I am a person who believes in science as well as spirituality. So I do believe they do work together. They do work hand in hand. The greatest thing in this universe, I would say, would be intention. Whatever your intention is, that's really what outlasts and outlives everything. It is the thing that really drives us all, the intention. We all get up for work every day because the intention is to survive. The intention is to make the money. The intention is to be there, be present for the thing that we're really working for. If you're working toward buying a house, you're going to make sure you get up and go to work every day and earn the money. The intention is what drives us. Okay? That being a positive intention, and of course there are lots of negative intentions as well. I don't want to really dive into those, but that is one of the reasons why this podcast does exist. My intention really is to help give a voice and give some clarity and also some encouragement for those who are looking to, walk further in their spiritual path. And this is one of the hardest things to embrace, which is the paranormal, religion, and science. Because this is one of the things that we have to untangle before we move forward. This really is the sticky, gritty stuff before we start saying we are a grand high wizard, we are this or we are that, or we are, definitely, initiated in this and that. We have to get to the bottom of where science, the paranormal, and religion entangle. They entangle for really good reasons, then they entangle for really negative reasons. And I'm just wanting to get to both sides of that in this very short podcast. Another question you might be asking, does gender play a role? Do more females or males experience paranormal activity more than the other? And the answer is no. It's a very even keel with all the studies and all the research. It is an even keel that men experience paranormal situations just as much as women do. Women are more likely to tell about them because of the stereotype that women are highly intuitive, which is actually not just a stereotype, but is actually a fact. However, males are just as intuitive. They're just not as verbal about their findings or about their experiences, which is a social, obviously a social construct. But nonetheless, women and men do experience the paranormal on an even scale. I would like to know your thoughts on this subject in particular. I know there's a lot that I didn't cover. There's a lot I know. There's a lot to unwrap and a lot to untangle. there's still a lot of questions in regards to this. There's still a lot of things that we have not discovered about the paranormal. So there are still more things to take and to leave. So I want to know and have those conversations and see where you're at in your paranormal experience. Have you had like ever been torn between wanting to believe or not wanting to believe, a paranormal experience that you might have? How are you able to even define what a paranormal experience is to you? Is it dreams? Is it touch? Is it, smelling a scent in the room that should not be there? For those of you who have experience, smelling the perfume of a loved one just randomly and they've been passed. So what exactly is a paranormal experience to you? What does that mean to you? Definitely comment below. I do post these to be commented on, have those conversations, share your thoughts on that. What you agree with. Do you agree with, how this was explained? Would you view this in a different way? Are you more of sciencey? Are you more religious? Are you more spiritual? How does it tie in with you? How does it connect with you? And how do you feel about even being aligned with this podcast? Was there something that you did not know before? Or do you feel like there's something you could contribute to it? Definitely let me know. You guys know I'm always interested in what you have to say and what you have to contribute. So once again, guys, I'm Christina with Karma's Eye Psychic LLC, Universal Spirit here on this podcast. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe. I am on all social media: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, just everywhere. I'm on Twitter as well and YouTube. So subscribe to those channels. Definitely follow. There's always something to hear, something to learn, and always something to contribute as well. I'm very interested in what your thoughts are. And give me an idea and shoot me a comment or a text about what you want the next episode to be about. Continuing this paranormal series. All right, lovies. Take care. See you in the next episode.